Hello everyone, and here we are back on the E30 with the S65 swap. So on the last video, part 3, that was the transmission. So we finally got the whole engine and transmission in place. So now part 4 is the differential or the rear subframe, however you want to call it. So let's get into a couple things. She's been neglected a little bit. I apologize. There's a lot of workload. As I stated before in some of the other videos, you know, sometimes you bring something in and you find a couple more issues. You have to order parts, or that's a delay. And it just at some point, I just end up having to push back some of the scheduled appointments that I had, and I wasn't able to bring the car in like I was hoping for, or was like maybe 3, 4, 5 days out of the month just to bring it in and work a little bit on something, shoot some video and then kind of put it back. That way she doesn't sit in one of the corners of my garage collecting dust. Now she did collect a little bit of a dust, but not a lot of dust. But anyways, in the interim of all that as well, one of the things that we were able to do was swap out the E30 suspension. So now the suspension in this car has been installed and we are using the Z3. Unfortunately, we're not using the Z3 M Coupe because the pricing are through the roof. It was just a lot of money for an M Coupe rear suspension. So what we decided to do, or what GR decided to do, was just go ahead and utilize just a regular Z3. So with that being said, that means new axles. So we're going to have to go in and create some new axles, which was at the end of it all much more less expensive than it would be on purchasing the actual M Coupe suspension in the back. So let's take a look at a couple things on the differential and see what we end up choosing, and kind of some of the stuff that I looked at and came across, and see exactly where I plan to be going, which is version 3, or let's say it's plan C is where I'm at. So let's take a peek at that real quick. Okay, so here we are, the E46 M3 differential. It's what we're going to be using in this build for the rear subframe. Okay, so I originally had the car over on my bay, trying to get an idea of how to go about creating this. I had it on pretty high jack stands, and I was able to roll around in my creeper to kind of do some measurements, kind of look, and trying to also take everything that's in place now of what I am going to come across with some hoses and the rear sway bar, that kind of stuff. So all that has to come into play on how I build this, because I want to be able to remove the rear sway bar and not be super tight to where maybe I can install a bigger sway bar. So all those come into consideration when I'm doing some of this stuff. So originally, by looking underneath, I was trying to, again, let me touch base. I want to try to keep as much of the E30, both the front subframe or the rear subframe, and then the actual chassis itself. So originally I started to try to see if I could utilize the hanger and build something on the other side on the chassis itself for the stock E30 diff, but unfortunately moving it up it was not sufficient enough, because the mounting points on the E46 M3 diff are up top and the E30 are down in the center. So the room here, I did not have enough clearance for the chassis and the top of the diff. So plan A out the window. So then I started looking at, okay, this is what I'm going to end up using, and started trying to think of ideas or what to look at and how to make this a very clean installation and to make these things look very pleasing to the eyes. So what I wanted to do, or by doing that, is then I wanted to use the mounting points of the E46 M3 subframe. So that means having the mounting points in the back here, so that way the cover is completely accessible and you can visually see it. And the same thing with the front mounting point on the diff. So the front mounting point is not that hard. All right, so what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to be taking one from a rear subframe and I'm going to be welding that into the E30 subframe. So that takes care of that front mounting point of the differential. Then it puts me back to the case itself. So started looking at an E46 M3 rear subframe. Fortunately, the ones I was able to find were a complete kit, as I didn't find one that was available that just for that itself. And plus the price, looking at what that was and only using those pickup points, I'm like, so I scrapped that, so plan B was out of the question. Now, what I did come across was sometimes we like to hoard things, and I'm one. Actually, I just got rid of a bunch of stuff not too long ago, but this item I left aside thinking, I'm probably going to use this for this project. So what I've got is, I got an E36 rear subframe. All right, so this E36 came out of one of my Champ cars. And I'm going to be using the points, the pickup point off this subframe and create it and to install, or to have it to install the E46 M3 diff. Now, here is the problem that I came across. Not that I came across, but just one of the little hurdles was the actual mounting points. So if we concentrate on the rear cover, the diff bushings, they're identical. These bushings are, these are the ECS ones. So I have to use the stock E46 M3 bolts, and let me grab them real quick. One of these right here. Okay, so this is an inverted Torx. So this one goes perfectly well right in there. Okay, so now trying to use an E36 bolt, which is one of these, and it's a hex bolt, it will not go in there. All right, and then also trying to get a socket in there is not going to work. So the problem also that I encountered is these are 12 mils, but the thread pitch are different. So I can't use this on an E36 chassis. So, so what I found was an actual polyurethane bushing kit for an E36. And then that is a kit that on the front differential mounting point is a bigger hole, meaning it's going to fit a 14 millimeter bolt. So a standard one is 12 mil. Now the kit that I'm getting is in case you upgrade your bolt on the E36 differential, put a bigger bolt on there. That kit is for that. So I'm using that, and here is, of course, just to give you an idea, there's is a 12 mil and there's a 14 mil. So this 14 mil is what normally would go in here. So the kit that I found will accept a 14 millimeter bolt, which is going to be the actual bolt that goes into the front section of the differential. So this bushing problem solved, and I'm able to use an E36 one. So I'm going to take this mounting point and weld it onto the E30 front cross member. Now it still lies with this section here, which is the actual bolt. So I stated earlier, different thread pitch wouldn't work. It wouldn't work to swap bolts around. So what I end up finding is the kit that I found, these mounting points are different, so it will allow one of these hex bolts to work. Now these are the same for an E36 and E46, so that's why I was able to use that. So now I found my polyurethane kit that I'm going to be using that's going to fit the E36 subframe, and then also let me able to use the E46 M3 differential. So yeah, I think that pretty much covers this portion. So right now what we're going to do is going to jump on the back end and see what we got there. All right, here we go. The diff's somewhat in place. So I kind of got the front section right in the center of the E30 cross member. So what I end up doing is I put certain washers underneath the yoke and the cross member itself. So I got the front centered, and by cutting these pieces off here was able to get me these pieces here. That's where the OEM brackets went for the OE diff for the E30. So I got to remove the spot welds, or drill out the spot welds so I could remove the brackets on both sides, because this piece back here in the back, it has to be removed so that I could go up further with the diff. Right now the diff up front is good. The diff in the back needs to go up higher towards the chassis, so I gotta end up working that part out. So I mentioned before that this cross member here, or this section here, will have to be maybe cut down and reinforced. That still looks like it's a possibility. It's going to happen. The reason being because the diff cover itself comes really close hitting that, and there's a bolt right here that's pretty much almost kind of leaning on it. So I got to keep an eye on that. But and also what I've also done is I've used some straps and held the suspension up so that way I can keep an eye through the axle, through the hub itself, to see where the center point is, so I can make sure that the axle isn't too far back or too far forward. So keeping an eye on that as well. So let's take a look on the front mounting point of the diff. Okay, so here's the front section of it, and this is a section on the diff right here that is rubbing on this brace, on the E30 brace. So I mentioned earlier that I will have to end up cutting that down or cutting that back. So I'm going to end up picking this section right here. There's a little notch. I'm going to go straight across. This section here up top more is almost rubbing on the diff on the other side. So once I cut from here, that way all that will be will give me the room or the space that I need. So yeah, so the diff bolt, the diff itself, or the front mounting bushing, will go right here, and I will have to tweak and put some brackets out to that. So yeah, so as of right now, I'm just going to start doing some more cutting. Okay, so this point has taken me a lot longer than I anticipated. It's crazy. I just want to make sure I get this pretty much in the right spot. But let's go over a few stuff that I have done and to get me where I'm at. So I have removed the section on the stock E30 crossmember that is no longer needed because of the differential. It doesn't use those mounting points, so that's been removed. Plus this section right here on the differential was rubbing on the inside of that plate that was removed. Now another thing what I ended up doing is I wanted to make sure that my chassis is level, especially back here in the back. So I was able to clean it out and remove some of the undercoating here and there, and I put my level, try to get the car as level as possible. I've got a couple measurements that I took just to try to get my center point of the chassis, which is here. And then also I went ahead and just made a line to reference where the front pinion is at when I'm kind of working back here, to kind of give me an idea. And another thing that I end up doing as well is to give me some alignment points, is I have a drive shaft from an E36 that I installed up front that I was able to make work. It's bolted in place. I have a shaft, or actually a long extension with a socket on the inside of the drive shaft that is a straight line all the way towards the pinion itself. So that is my alignment point coming from the transmission to the front pinion nut, or the front, or the yoke itself. And then another thing I have is my alignment point on this shaft right here. This is the shaft that is that's inserted in the hub itself where the axle goes. This is helping me align up the center of the axle itself. That way the axles, the only bending they do is go up and down. It doesn't go forward or anything like that. I did verify, like on my race car, on my M3, it's best to try to get them straight. And on my car, you can tell it's just a tad bit forward, but my main goal is to have these straight. And by doing so, this section here has got to be cut out because the differential needs to go towards the back of the car, so that way the shafts itself are nice and straight. So I do have my mounting points from the E36 rear subframe that I was using. I got my front mounting point here with this polyurethane bushing that's already in there, and then the ears itself for the differential cover. I got those cut off as well. Don't know exactly how I'm going to end up utilizing these, but I have them here. But the front one is very easy. On this one, I did have to drill out the hole so I could get the bolt through it. And this one's just going to go right here. So once I can figure out how I'm going to cut this and how I'm going to go about creating this section here, so I can make the brackets to mount the back section in place, then I could go ahead and get that position. And I know as of right now, the rear sway bar, the OEM rear sway bar for the E30 has been removed because it's actually getting in the way of the differential. It may come back into place, but we will soon see. But right now, the rear sway bar can be added at a later point. Maybe even use the Z3 instead of the E30. yeah, I'm gonna keep plugging away. So I'm gonna start doing more measuring, doing more head scratching, and figure out how am I gonna cut that this section out right here, and that way that I don't have to build on it. I cut it to where I could go from there. So yep, stay tuned. Okay, so finally got to a cutting. So I ended up cutting the center section out here, and so as I stated before, just going and trying to think of the way to do it. So no matter what, this section that I end up cutting out, what I thought of is the gap here that I'm going to end up taking up. I was going to probably cut that piece down and put it back up there and re-weld it, and add some more support here, because I do want to add support here, because then this will be a weak point for the differential. So I wanted to make sure I at least have a support bar all the way across. If need be, I could probably go ahead and do an additional support, which I will get to that point once the differential is mostly in, and I'll see if I can end up doing it. And I do want to make a note that thank goodness that the spare tire compartment has been removed. It actually has made this much more easier to do this, as I was able to stand up and take some measurements from up top and kind of look at where I'm at with my brackets that I've got over here on the floor. But yes, it definitely helps out, because a lot of my measurements I was standing up front to be able to get that. But anyways, again, I'm going to go over it again. This line here is just mainly more of the reference point of where my try to get it as best to where my the pinion nut is at, to try to get it center. That way I kind of can see the drive shaft. The differential is technically in the spot that it's going to be. So just to go over a few stuff, I went ahead and remeasured everything again to get me to where I'm at. So what I ended up doing is, I know I measured from here to make sure the body was even. Even. Then I also went and removed some of the seam sealer here, and I went ahead and took my measurements from here to here from the beam, so I could get my center point here, and then figure out how much I wanted to cut away. And also what I ended up doing is I also took the measurement from where the sway bar bracket, from the inner portion of the sway bar brackets. I went ahead and took that measurement and to get my center point. So I got two measurements just to make sure that my mark here is pretty much in the center, so that way I could help, or it could help me and assist the alignment of that. Now, another thing too is making sure that the front diff, I made sure I have plenty of clearance up top and towards the bottom of how the front is. As you can see, I do have the front bushing in place, and I know already an idea how I'm going to do the front, so I'll get to that here soon. Because I think what I'm going to be doing is this installation first. I'm going to fix this and get this done, and then I'll come up and go through this. But I already went ahead and created the brackets to the diff cover ears are going to bolt onto or weld onto. So let's take a look at that real quick. Okay, so here is the brace, the bracket that I created so that I can mount the differential cover ears on. So initially, when I did this, when I went this route, this is a 2" by 1" square tubing. With it sitting on top of these ridges right here, it was actually the right size. So I knew by having that, I was going to get me the right size. But because I wanted it to be completely formed with that whole section up top, I went ahead and cut the slots out. And by doing so, I already knew I was going to have a gap right here originally. And yeah, so I ended up taking that gap. So I'm going to create an additional bracket or a plate right here, so that way I could weld onto that. Now, another thing that I wanted to do is, where I was thinking about, was the 2x1 tubing is technically not wide enough for this. So I already had it in mind that I was going to create an additional bracing on the inside of this section here. So that will be done. You'll see soon. A handful of things that I was trying to make sure that this differential was pretty much as level as possible, being from front to rear, side to side, and all that stuff. So again, you know, I checked all my measuring points and see where I was at. And another thing too that I didn't mention earlier was to make sure that the diff is technically straight up and down. By doing that, I just end up using my level and put it on the actual hubcap itself. I did the left-hand side, not the right-hand side, because the right-hand side has got play. This one is the longer shaft of them all, and this one is solid as can be. So right now, straight up and down this way, it is level, And then also what I end up doing is taking a look at my front compared to where the rear and see if I'm too high in the rear or too low in the rear. And what ended up being was the way I have it now, I'm pretty much on there to where, of course, it's very tough to get a spot to put a level on it, but I was able to find something really close that, I kid you not, it's so off by a tad bit that I don't think it's going to make a difference. And I just put it technically right here on the back side of the fin, keeping in mind on how the flat surface of the diff is. And I was looking at that to make sure that the diff is not tipped forward too much or tipped back too far. So I got that pretty much right on the money. So my next step is now to start creating and working on the front one, and I'm going to start working on that because that's going to then get me situated there, and then I'll be able to go in and finalize and stitch weld everything that I need to do here and do my finalized welding. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with that. All right, so I came up with the plan, and what I am going to be doing is I'm going to be utilizing my 1 inch and a quarter steel tube that I used for the engine mounts and for the the transmission cross member. So I'm going to use that. So what I've done is I've already cut it out to length. I've already notched out where the bushing goes, and I capped the end. And the reason why I capped the end is so I have a place, a good surface to weld on. So now the reason why I did this is that this tube is going to go through from the front of the cross member through the cross member itself, and then connect to the diff bushing itself, the part that I'm going to be welding to. So this way it's going to be nice and strong. There's going to be 2 welding points on the front side of the cross member, and I'm also going to be welding on the back side. So that should be nice and sturdy. That way that it isn't just a surface mount weld. I want to make sure that she is sturdy. So that is part of this section here. There is more that I'm going to add, but I'm going to do that once I have the diff cover tacked in place and I have it where I need it. And then when I get that done, I'll be able to drop some of the stuff and go in and create another tube that's going to go from, I'll call it the top side up towards the top section of that of the E30 cross member. So yeah, so I'm going to get to some tacking. So let's get to it. Okay, so there it is. The diff's pretty much in place. So what I'm going to end up doing is just going through and finishing this portion off right here. So the section that I originally cut off, I went ahead and took back off, and I already went ahead and cut the section down so where it can fit, because the diff cover was hitting originally here. By cutting it off, it gave me the clearance that I needed here on those mounts. So by doing so, it's just going to go right on top of there, which is going to sit right above this bolt right here. It should be easy enough to remove and install, as that's not going to get in the way of the removal or installation at a later point. But yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and finish this up. She's tacked into place, so she looks good. I went ahead and rechecked all my measurements or my alignment points, and everything still came into place, so that's great. I still have to finish the upper section of the front mount, which I'll end up doing that, but I want to go ahead and get this section done. That way I can be technically done here, and when that is done, tacked into place, then I'll drop the diff back down, and then I'll start working and drop the E30 cross member down as well, and then finish up the front mount. So yeah, stay tuned for that. All right, so now the E30 rear subframe is complete. I went ahead and got my upper support taken care of. Still end up using the 1 1/4 I was about to say square tubing. So what I ended up doing is I kept going back and forth to my bender. So I ended up bending it to 46 degrees. So by doing so and the reason why I was doing it was I wanted to make sure that I didn't bend it too far down, because I didn't want a lot of material inside of this area right here where the E30, where the yoke would go, because it is a very tight tolerance for the yoke on the E46 M3 diff. So that was my main goal. Now on top, it did stick out a little bit. I ended up having to trim that down, and I kind of flattened it a tad bit, so that way I have a pretty good area that it's welded on top of the diff for additional support. So by doing that as well, it also helped me get my clearance issue that I was probably going to have, which I knew it was going to be an issue, is by getting it down, and now I'll have no issues clearing the actual chassis itself. So with that all done and welded and all put together, I also took just a few little extra minutes, and actually a little longer than minutes, but I went ahead and I added a gusset as well, just to make it look a little spiffy, I guess. So that's taken care of. So at this point, the rear subframe is complete. There are a couple things I'm going to be doing to it, which I'll touch base with that here soon. And the upper is taken care of as well. So by having a diff up there, I realized what I wanted to do. So what I end up doing with that is, if you remember, I end up cutting the original one down and welding it back up there. And this time what I end up doing is, on top of that, I added a 3/4 inch square tubing to it, because the 3/4 inch square tubing here gave me enough room on the back side to where it wouldn't hit the diff, but it would cover just a little bit much, about like a 1/2 inch of the diff here on this side. But it completely clears. So I ended up adding that, and I also notched it for where the rounded section of the ears. So yeah. So these are now completely welded in place, from the front section and the back section, and also where the panel is at. So that is nice and strong, which of course that's what I want. I don't want to have any issues down the road. So yeah. So for the back end, this is pretty much almost done. I will pick up once the differential is back in, but there are a few stuff I want to do to the rear suspension, and that is reinforce it. So I'm going to end up doing that now, since everything is down. So one of the things that I'll end up I'll be adding is the eccentric toe and camber adjustments. I'll be adding those. I got the actual bolts sitting right here. I can't see because of the light, it's probably too bright. And then the other thing that I'll be doing as well is reinforcing the control arms. So I got the plates here, and then the rod here. These are from Garage Stick. So and I think that's it. A couple little things to do to that, but that's it. So I'm gonna go ahead and pick up the reinforcement part at another video. Yeah, hopefully hang tight, and then we'll have the differential up here. I'll bolt it in, and we'll take a bigger or better look at it when she's pretty much all back in. So stay tuned for that. All right, everyone, the diff is installed, and I tell you what, it was really easy to install. Yes, you know, we try to make things a little bit easy for down the road, and this differential is. It does help that we do not have a spare tire thing here, but by the time we put the delete, and even if we still had the spare tire thing, I think we'd be okay, only because the bolts would come out and should be fine. Those don't get in the way of on the section on the diff back here. So, but yes, she's in. I am very happy. It came out really well. So yeah. So another thing that I ended up doing when I had the diff down, and I can't remember if I said this on previous clips, is since everything was down, I went ahead and did the toe and camber correction plates. Those have been installed. Also, the reinforcements for the brackets for the control arms have been installed, and also the reinforcement on the lower control arms as well. So you got the rods here, and then the plates underneath here, those have already been done. So that was going to be coming in for the next video that I'll end up doing on that. So the progress of this car is moving forward. So yep, and glad to be pretty much done with the rear of the car. The only thing I have to do is just little things here and there that's going to come up down the road. But the next thing is just installing the actual spare tire delete panel, and I'll be stitch welding that sucker back into place. And I do have one small little section that I have to go and add a tad bit. GR got a little bit carried away with the grinder or the saw, and cut a little bit too much away. So I got to make just a small little adjustment and create like a little bracket or a little something for that, so I could have something to weld onto. So yes, done with this section. Car is moving forward. Glad I'm back on it. And like always, guys, to help the channel, you got to hit the subscribe button. Please do. And see you in the next video.